Good Erev Shabbos, everybody, and thank you so much for joining me as we have an opportunity to reflect together for a few minutes regarding this coming week's Parsha, Parshas Bo. Now, Parshas Bo, as we know, includes the climactic conclusion to Yetzias Mitzrayim. Of course, we are going to continue to read in the coming weeks of Kriyas Yamsuf, Maimed Har Sinai, but certainly the conclusion of the period of the enslavement, the moment of the Exodus, the conclusion, the finale, if you will, of the 10 Makos, all comes to a very, very climactic moment in this week's Parsha, Parshas Bo. Now, we read the Parsha each and every year. We reflect upon these events, and we see them, of course, for what they are, important moments in our history. But if we had to go back and imagine at the time, how many eyewitnesses were there to the events that took place in Mitzrayim? How many people actually witnessed the Makos, the moment of Yetzias Mitzrayim? So it's hard to know for sure, but I think it would be fair to say that there were millions of people. We know that there were, certainly prior to the death of about 80% of the Jewish people in Mitzrayim, but certainly afterwards there were close to 2 million Jews that left Mitzrayim. In addition, you have, of course, the Mitzrayim themselves. So there were millions and millions of people who had the opportunity to see the incredible might of God, who witnessed incredible nisim, who witnessed the osos, the movsim, such an important part of our history. But there were two Jews, there were two people who we know for sure were unable to be eyewitnesses to these events. There were two people who were alive at the time, two very, very important individuals, people who are, as we would say today, very well connected, who had tremendous protectia, but yet we're not fortunate enough, if you will, to be able to be eyewitnesses to this event. And those two individuals are, of course, Moshe's children, Gershom and Eliezer. They were in Midian. They missed out on this entire experience. Perhaps Moshe kept them there for safety purposes, but that does not prevent the Rabbi Shua Mibelz, the Admar Rabbi Shua Mibelz, the Belzer Rebbe, to ask the question that would probably bother each and every one of us, and that is, why would it be? How could it be that HaKadosh Baruch Hu would determine that the sons of Moshe Rabbeinu, such important people, literally the sons of the leader himself, would be missing, would be absent from such an important time in history? Each and every one of us. So we did not have the opportunity to be there, perhaps personally. We weren't around at the time, but everyone else was there. The millions and millions of Jews, they were all there. So why should it be the Dafka, the two sons of Moshe Rabbeinu, Nebuch, they missed the entire show? So we know that one of the most sacred obligations that we have as Jews is to recount the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim. And although this is performed in a most dramatic and I guess we would say elaborate way each and every year on the night of Pesach through the mitzvah of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim, the importance of remembering this moment in history influences many of our obligations throughout the year. This is such an important part of our experience as Jews. Think of how many times we use the words Zeicher L'Tzias Mitzrayim. Now, this remembering is facilitated first and foremost through conversations that take place, ideally between parents and children, although not only in the most limited sense, it includes, of course, grandparents and great-grandparents and teachers, but ultimately, as Jews, we know that it is our sacred responsibility to transmit the story of our history to the next generation, and to tell them about the incredible heritage that we have. Now, this is such a sacred and extraordinary task that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to make sure that Moshe Rabbeinu would demonstrate first and foremost by example, and in turn instill within each and every one of us the potential to accomplish this truly important and great task. And so therefore, the Belzer Rebbe suggests that the reason why HaKadosh Baruch Hu orchestrated the events so that Moshe Rabbeinu's sons would not be there is because then Moshe would have no choice but to go ahead and to tell them the story. And by doing so, by Moshe taking that experience and trying to figure out how to package it and to deliver it to individuals who are not themselves present, to people who were not personal eyewitnesses, would have been mashrish, it would have been implanted, allowed to take root within each and every one of us, the potential to achieve that sort of amunah, to have the ability, the capacity to connect with stories from the past, Why? Because this is what I heard from my parents, and they heard it from their parents. That all started with Moshe Rabbeinu. Had everyone been there, had everyone been able to be an eyewitness, so this would not have been able to start with Moshe Rabbeinu himself. The Belzer Rebbe points out so beautifully that you see this alluded to in the beginning of the parsha, because the pasuk that we're going to read again this coming Shabbos says, "Uleman tisaper ba'aznei bincha uben bincha," that you should tell your children and your grandchildren, "Esasher hisalalti b'Mitzrayim ve'esososaya shesamti b'am," all of the events that transpired in Mitzrayim, all of the wondrous events that took place, vidatem ki ani Hashem, and they will then know that I am God. And the Belzer Rebbe points out that if you look, the pasuk begins b'lashon yachid, uleman tisaper ba'aznei bincha uben bincha, talking about speaking to your children, your grandchildren, you, single individual. But ultimately, the goal is vidatem ki ani Hashem, that this should have an impact, an effect upon future generations as well. What an incredible idea, an extraordinary idea, that Moshe Rabbeinu was the one to sort of pave the way and to create a foundation upon which each and every one of us have the opportunity, and we should be inspired to do so, to transmit so many aspects of our rich heritage, of our important history, that Masorah, to our children, to our grandchildren, to our students, to anyone, in fact, who we can inspire. Now, I think this is a particularly important message for our generation. The prevalence of technology in our lives have created, I would say, numerous paradoxical situations, many of which we have reflected upon in the past. So, for example, I'm not the first to point out that we are so connected, on the one hand, virtually, yet people crave connection like they never have before. We are able to communicate with anyone we want at any time, but yet many people will tell you that they've never been so lonely before in their lives. People have access to information, and the ease of automation has enabled us to accomplish so much at our fingertips. Yet, at the same time, there's a measured rise and increase in depression all around the world. You would think that, with all of these improvements in technology, the ability to connect, the ability to be efficient, the ability to produce, so this would make us feeling more connected, less lonely, more happy and fulfilled in life, but we're finding the opposite. And there's another paradox to consider, and that is that today we experience so much, I dare say almost everything together. Events, big and small, are almost always recorded and disseminated throughout the entire world in an instant. Personal moments in our lives, family moments, and of course, great national moments are spread and shared at lightning speed. Now, you would think, therefore, that this has enabled us to sort of process these moments and to appreciate these experiences in a more profound and an enriched way, right? What I see, I'm not only seeing through my own eyes and perspective, but look at me, I'm joined by members of my family, my friends, and at times millions of others. But the reality is that this is far from the truth, that it is not enough to participate in stories as casual witnesses and passive bystanders. It's not enough to be included in the 2 million Jews who were zocha to be part of the moment of Yetzias Mitzrayim. The reality is that we have to engage in conversations, in dialogue, and transmit the stories of our lives to ourselves and to our children. And this was what Moshe Rabbeinu was being taught by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the awesome responsibility to teach one's children and to transmit details of our history is not only a b'diavad, meaning it's not something that you must do to address a need, but all things being equal, that need would not be there. No, to the contrary, it is what we call a lechatchila. This is the way it should be. We shouldn't be experiencing things separately, but on parallel tracks. We should be experiencing them, discussing them, and processing them together. How sad it is sometimes when you see families spending time together, but yet they are spending time together, each and every one of them looking at their own devices. And there are even times where they may be watching or experiencing the same thing and having some sort of conversation together, casually, using, if you will, different wavelengths, as we call multitasking. But these experiences, while they may seem very efficient at the time, are actually doing us a great disservice, because no more can it be assumed, can it be taken for granted, that people will experience things on their own, that someone will have been witness to some extraordinary event, something that was very exciting, something that was very inspiring, or perhaps something was very disappointing or upsetting or frightening, and coming and to share that and to discuss it with another, to share it with one's children, one's parents, one's spouse, whatever the case may be, and to reflect upon it, and not to say, here, watch this. Now, I want to conclude with something that I just thought of today, even though I haven't thought about it in years. And I'm actually going to try to share something with you. But I'll just tell you very briefly, the background to this is that I'm sure that many of you remember that about 5 years ago, there was a horse that was actually very close and near and dear to those of us in Teaneck, American Pharaoh, that won the Triple Crown. And it was, if I remember correctly, the first time that horse had won the Triple Crown in 40 years, if I remember correctly. It was a very, very long time. So it was an awesome moment, and everybody was talking about it. And at the time, somebody told me that you have to take a look at the cover of Sports Illustrated. Now, I don't remember if I did at the time, but it was very easy to find it tonight, and it came back to mind. And I'm going to share it with you right now. There it is. Hopefully you can see it. Now, this is a picture that is taken of the moment in which American Pharaoh crosses the finish line and becomes the first Triple Crown winner in over a generation. And what you see, if you're able to see it on your screen in front of you, you see, I don't know, hundreds of people who are all watching this event through their smartphones. Rather than actually take the moment in with their own eyes, these very fortunate, privileged people who had the opportunity to be standing there right at the finish line at this historical, momentous time in history, what are they doing? They are looking at their phones as if they don't capture that moment, it will be lost. That we would not have been able to witness that event along with them, as if somehow Sports Illustrated would not have been able to get their hands on a photo, because that is our knee-jerk reaction today. What we run to do whenever something is happening is to quickly capture it, a photo, a video, and to share it. But what we're not doing enough of is talking to each other, communicating with each other, talking to each other. HaKadosh Baruch Hu orchestrated it, that Moshe's two sons, Gershom and Eliezer, would not be personally present at the moment of Yetzias Mitzrayim. They would miss out on the Eser Makos. They, like us, would have no choice but to learn of that experience. They would have no choice but to first process those memories, not through their own eyes, but through the collective eyes and memories of their parents and grandparents and generations. Moshe Rabbeinu instilled within each and every one of us the capacity to be on both sides of that conversation, to be people who transmit, to be people who are moser to the next generation, and also to be people who are makabel, that mesira, the people who are able to receive. And how important it is, how essential it is that we remember that even at a time, what do they call this, the information age, when there's information available to each and every one of us, and we can find out, we can access in real time whatever it is that piques our curiosity at any point, but that is never, and it will never be, a substitute for genuine human conversation. The ability to go ahead and to process and to discuss and to think and to question critically the information that is shared with us. And that process is much more enriching. It is ultimately so much more satisfying. And it is ultimately what enables us to develop the truest sense of Emunah. Ironically and strangely, you would think that the person who witnesses something firsthand, so that provides the basis for the ultimate level of Emunah. But rarely in life is that so. It's values, it's conversations, it's ideas and thoughts and experiences that come through our parents, grandparents, our teachers, that have an emotional impact on us. So it's v'hashivosa el vavecha, v'yadata hayom v'hashivosa el vavecha. Information that we hear, and then ultimately it becomes sort of restored and firmly implanted within our hearts. We should be zocheh, to be inspired. Gershom and Eliezer were not alone, because, of course, there were millions and millions that followed. We are among them who know of these miraculous events that we read about in Parshas Bo only because we have heard them, because we have been told from our grandparents and our great-grandparents for generations and generations all that happened in Mitzrayim. And to understand and to appreciate that connecting with our history in such a way is not a b'diavad. It's not, well, what are we going to do? We weren't there, so we have no choice, but is a lechatchila, and it provides us with a paradigm of what true communication and genuine, meaningful, and lasting experiences can and truly be in this world. Thank you so much.